Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine the show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Matt S., Cindy W., Brent S., and Todd A. We've got new guests on the show today, a new guest and a returning guest. We have Mr. John Wilton with us and Mr. Derek Iwanaka of BeMetals Corp. John is the company president and CEO, and Derek is the vice president in investor relations and corporate development. BeMetals is advancing the core South Mountain development project in Idaho, United States, that contains a number of metals, as well as exploration stage projects in Zambia and Japan. BeMetals is a portfolio holding at SmithWeekly Research. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol BMET and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol BMTLF. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation.
Andrew, thanks for having me back.
Well, let's start out here. I'd like to get each of your guys' views, and maybe we'll start with John here. Give us your view here on the overall natural resource market at this point, and specifically speak to the metals that the company is focused on. John, take it away.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I mean, we've got a sort of a broad portfolio in BeMetals, as you just mentioned. So we're covering gold exploration now. We have exposure to precious metals through our South Mountain project in any event, which has a significant gold and silver credit to that base metal mineralization. And obviously that South Mountain project has also got a component of copper, as it's a true polymetallic. And we have the copper focused exploration out in Zambia, looking for extensions to the very prolific Zambian copper belt. In terms of pricings at the moment, I think there's been obviously a bit of a retracing in prices in the last week or 10 days or so. But I think in the sort of medium term and longer term, gold and base metals have probably got a role to play. Specifically, gold is a safe haven and store of value. A lot of jurisdictions and governments, printing a lot of cash through stimulus to probably get us out of the COVID situation on infrastructure projects. And that really also links into increased demand for base metals, specifically copper. And I think something that's probably overlooked is the role of copper, for example, in the sort of whole green energy space. There's a lot of airtime given to battery metals such as lithium and cobalt. But at the end of the day, copper's consumption in all those green energy alternatives is going to be significant.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a little of a shame that the Fed came out and was a little hawkish and has pulled back the gold price, but I think that's pretty short term. And I mean, I don't think there's a way to see how inflation's not going to creep in here, and that should be good for gold, at least historically it has been. And then as John mentioned, I mean, if the countries are trying to recover from the COVID pandemic, economic destruction is done, you have to spend at least some of your money on infrastructure, and that can only be good for copper and zinc and other base metals as well. So I think we're in the right metals at the moment.
Back to John's comment on the copper component, that's the feeder to the rest of this key component. And I would also just add too that this whole climate change approach and this, green revolution, electric vehicle, just basically electrification trends across the board are also backed heavily. If you're going to eventually eliminate fossil fuels from energy sources, that also uranium is one of those cornerstones to the energy market. So uranium and copper go very well together, where the rest of this stuff really feeds off of that. You're not going to be able to mine your Bitcoin without nuclear power. It's very important that copper be a huge play in this, and that uranium is a growing form of energy as we transition off of these inferior forms of energy. So, well, John, you're new to the program and probably to some of our audience as well. Why don't you just cover your background and experience for us?
So I'm a geologist by training, over 30 years experience now in the mineral exploration, development and mining business. I started my career in South Africa, working for one of the large South African mining companies, and really my interaction with the current board of directors came around in that in the late 90s. I was a principal member of a team that discovered what's now the Otjikoto gold mine in northern Namibia. A grassroots discovery that we made from early geophysical surveys, took that right through to the drill discovery with about 1.82 million ounces in resource. So that's I worked for a company called Antofagasta PLC, the large Chilean copper producer, running exploration and new business throughout Africa. And then was given this exciting opportunity about three and a half years ago now to head up BeMetals. Initially looking for base metals, and now we've expanded to include gold and precious metals into our portfolio. Really exciting opportunity, and we've made good progress on that in the last 3.5 years or so.
John, that sounds good. I appreciate you covering some of the background there. I think it's important to point out for you specifically in your history with the B-Suite group, if you will. Okay, so maybe just a quick status update on the company, and then Derek, I'll ask you in a moment about share structure.
Yeah, sure. So where we are at the moment, we're developing a portfolio of assets which are both exploration and development in nature. They we've got sort of a global reach, if you want to call it. To do it chronologically, we started the company with one of my former Antofagasta exploration properties in northwestern Zambia, where we're really exploring there for world-class copper deposits on extensions to the Zambian copper belt underneath cover units of what's called the Kalahari Sand Desert, basically. That's a similar overall principle to how we found that gold deposit in Namibia that was concealed by a calcrete cover unit. What that means is there was no outcropping mineralization that we could work from. We had to use geophysics, follow up shallow drilling, and then core drilling to really find that gold deposit, and that's what we're applying to the Zambian copper belt. Following that, we wanted to get ourselves a more advanced asset into the company, and after much searching, we really found a really very interesting deposit in southwestern Idaho called the South Mountain Project. We built a relationship with the vendors and optionees of that property, Thunder Mountain Gold, a well-established Idahoan-based team. And that's a high-grade zinc, gold, silver, copper polymetallic deposit that we're really excited about. It was a small past producer. There's underground development, and we've been exploring that project by doubling the resource base recently through underground drilling. So we're really encouraged about that. And at the moment, we're looking to advance a PEA study that should be completed in September this year. Earlier this year, we had another exciting opportunity that led to us acquiring 5 high-quality gold exploration properties in Japan. Quite an exotic destination, and what really drew us there, as with all our projects, was really driven by geology, prospectivity, and opportunity. And with our company called Kazan Gold in Japan, we're really looking to explore some real high-quality gold projects that have the potential to deliver high-grade underground gold mines, with good exploration success.
Good pipeline coming here, South Mountain development stage at this point, which I think is important, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But Derek, how about the share structure here? You and I don't think you've been on the program for at least 1.5 years, if I remember, but can you just update us on the current share structure here, the cash position, the shares out, and then also, because major holders are important here, including recent major holders coming into the roster.
Sure. So at the moment, we have about 177 million shares outstanding, and that includes all the shares that were issued for this Kronk transaction. That was the recent acquisition of the gold properties in Japan. In addition to that, we have about 16 million options, and I'd say the average strike price on those are about 28 cents or close to 30 cents. Very few warrants. There's just about 1 million warrants left that are outstanding. And the current cash position at the end of April was about $11 million, and we haven't really spent too much since then. Market cap, I'd say we're kind of fluctuating between about 60 and $70 million. What's pretty key for us, I think, is the share roster. Certainly, having Clive Johnson and some of the B2 executives are founders of our company, but also major shareholders, as well as John and I. So everybody has a stake in what we're doing. And Clive, John, myself, we've all purchased shares in the open market recently as well. So we do put our money where our mouths are. What we've been really working on lately is getting more institutional investors into the name. And I'd say just in the last couple months, we've started to get some traction with some of the key shareholders of particular with the key shareholders of B2 Gold. So that can only be positive. The relationship with B2 has really grown a lot stronger since this acquisition in Japan, and also because B2 Gold participated in a private placement a couple months ago where they took down $7.5 million and at a price of 44 cents a share, which is currently higher than where we are right now. So pretty attractive level to be getting stock if you can get into the market right now. We don't trade typically a huge amount of volume, so probably around 150,000 shares a day. Part of the reason is because we have pretty tight structure, a lot of insider ownership, as well as friends and family, and now institutions. You don't see a lot of selling, albeit there has been an exception to that rule in the last couple of weeks. I think with the gold price being suppressed, we have seen a couple, I guess you can call them aggressive sellers, have stepped into the market, but we seem to be mopping that up. So now is a pretty attractive level considering what we've accomplished in the last 2.5 years, 3 years, and where our share price is at currently.
How far do you see the cash lasting out there? When do you guys would expect to need to raise capital here? Or if you had some poor market conditions here, could you guys see that cash last through the end of the year, no problem?
Yeah, we're pretty well cashed up at the moment. So it kind of depends on where the South Mountain project goes. So we are supposed to be completing a PEA for that project in September. Assuming that we have to do additional drilling or do some additional work for the feasibility study, that would probably require some additional funds, and I don't know how much that will be at the moment. But if we were just to continue onwards with exploration in Japan, exploration in Zambia, and completing the PEA in at South Mountain, we should have sufficient funds to take us to around this time next year.
Okay. Well, before we get to South Mountain, Idaho here, let's go ahead and move back to Japan for a moment. Why don't you just cover the Japan projects here, talk about what the primary focus is, and maybe John can take the perspectivity of this particular set of projects in Japan, or if there's one project in particular you guys are going to focus on.
Yeah, sure. Do that with pleasure. So what really grabbed our attention here on the Japan acquisition of these properties is basically, as I said earlier, we're driven by geology and prospectivity primarily. The terrains in Japan are known to deliver high-grade gold mines. The sort of flagship of the Japanese gold sector is really the Hishikari mine, which is mined by Sumitomo Metal and Mining, and that's one of the world's highest-grade gold deposits. Been running for many decades. We're looking at probably since inception a deposit in excess of 8 million ounces, running at head grades of between 30 to 40 grams per ton gold. So a very valuable project and mining operation. And the similar geology to Hishikari is developed in a number of areas within Japan, both down on Kyushu itself, where Hishikari is located, and up on Hokkaido in the northeastern part of Japan. That's supported really by the fact that there's only really 3 companies, including ourselves, exploring in Japan for gold at this time. One of those is Urban Resources, that has Newmont as a significant shareholder and backer. The other one is Japan Gold, who have an exploration alliance with Barrick. So that gives you an idea of the pedigree with B2 Gold as a as a 19% shareholder in the company and a very strong technical and financial supporter. So that's really what drove us, the interest in here. And of the 5 properties, the more advanced project we call Kato up on Akaidu, mainly because we're working from some historical drill intersections there when exploration was carried out by the Japanese in the 1990s. Some really interesting high-grade gold mineralization with the associated bright textured alteration and geological setting. And one of our cornerstone advisors, Dr. Richard Salito, based in the UK here in London, he was very much involved with that exploration and is really a world authority on this style of gold mineralization, which is known as low sulfidation epithermal gold deposits, similar to the geological processes you see in Yellowstone Park in the US, and also the style of gold mineralization you get throughout Nevada. So really good pedigree in a style of mineralization that's known to produce a lot of ounces of gold and generally at the higher end grade profile of world production.
John, I appreciate that. Come back to the deal for a moment, and Derek, chime in where you want to here, but talk about the deal, guys, as far as, the vendor, why this was sold now. Why do you guys think you got a good deal?
So this exploration was being run through a private company called Cronk, which is Ontario listed, that wholly owns a local Japanese registered company called Kazan Resources, and B2 were funding that exploration in the last few years. Now, by bringing that project into BeMetals, that's probably given us more focus on that exploration. It also has created a liquidity event for the original Cronk investors. And a good project for us. Again, a lot of that comes down to the pedigree of the geological terrain. If you just look at the backing of the other companies exploring in Japan at this point in time, as I mentioned earlier, and that was a sort of a win-win situation for both the private investors in Cronk, for B2 Gold, and for BeMetals.
Derek, what's your thoughts on? John mentioned Newmont and Barrick, coming in with Japan Gold and Irving Resources. Not to do too much peer comparison here, but why do you guys think your assets are better? And would you guys be amenable to another partner? I mean, you've already got a partner in B2 Gold, but would you guys be amenable to another major or upper mid-tier partner?
Well, the partner of choice for us is certainly going to be B2 Gold, since we already have the relationship. And part of why we were able to get into this transaction was because they did start to do some exploration. That exploration at the time looked like it wasn't going to yield a multi-million ounce deposit. So something like, for B2 scale, they're looking for probably something that's 2 million ounce plus of a resource, which, for BeMetals, we would be very happy to find a 1 million ounce deposit at the moment. And if it became bigger and turned out to be a 2, 3, or 4 million ounce deposit, then I think that B2 Gold would certainly be the logical buyer or joint venture partner for us, especially. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if we're saying our projects are necessarily better than Japan Gold's or Irving's, but our team got in there around a similar time. They were able to stake up some good properties, and maybe what's different between us and perhaps them would be that we picked our projects specifically with potential to get them into production. So I don't know if Japan Gold actually intends to build a mine, but in our case, that is something that we would like to do, is actually to get into production.
Certainly, and your guys' operational experience would certainly back what you said there. And I think John gave us a little bit of an indicator of what type of profile, what type of grade, what type of setup that he would like to see, which, if that could happen, that's significant. But Derek, maybe let's come back here because you know this pretty well. How about your experience and maybe the overall company's experience in regards to what your view is on mineral exploration and development in Japan? Because I think many investors, at least the North America side of things, tend to have a view that Japan can be difficult with regards to natural resource development. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say Japan has certainly been overlooked as a prime destination. I mean, when people think of Japan, they probably think of, sushi and noodles and Mount Fuji and that type of thing. You don't normally think of it as being a geological hotbed. But I mean, if you look at Japan, I mean, it's along the Ring of Fire, um, and it has one of the highest operating gold mines in the world there. So I think it does get overlooked, and that's part of probably why our specifically our technical team really saw that there was a advantage by getting into Japan, especially early when the borders essentially opened up in about 2012, and they started to let in foreigners. Um, the Kronk team, which is basically led by the B2 Gold technical team, they were early to get into Japan and stake up some of these properties, and some of them are actually past producing mines or very close to past producing mines. So the potential to get them into production again or get them into new production is relatively good. Certainly better than most parts of Japan. I mean, if you think of Japan as being a very highly populated area, it is. But where we are specifically, which are relatively remote, especially for Japan, I would call Hokkaido especially quite remote. And the parts of Kyushu that we're in are also relatively remote. So you're not in highly densely populated areas of Japan, and they're very close to past producing mines. So you have that really good opportunity to potentially find a new one.
Derek, just your thoughts real quick. Give us maybe a comparative. Is Japan easier to deal with? I know certainly the team has done very well with developing and advancing projects in tougher jurisdictions, but can Japan be compared to like a BC as far as jurisdiction goes, British Columbia? Is it easier than that? How does Japan fall into your understanding and context of what you see as a good jurisdiction versus a more complex red tape jurisdiction?
Yeah, I don't even think Japan registers on the Fraser Institute list of countries to be in, since there are very few companies operating in Japan. So there's not a lot of, I guess, direct comparisons. But I mean, I am of Japanese of heritage. I've lived in Japan. I have a pretty good knowledge base around Japan. It is very structured. It is quite bureaucratic. But if you follow the law and you follow the regulations, almost everything always works out. So in our case, if it's permitting, which is probably going to be the major thing that people are worried about, if you follow the procedures that are prescribed by the government, there shouldn't be any issues. It may be slow, but you should be able to get it done. So we're pretty confident that when the time comes that we can get things permitted.
Very well.
I think maybe an important point as well that some people overlook is that Japan has got a long history in in gold mining from the past, but also there's a huge amount of metals business in Japan through smelting operations, both in base and base metal smelting operation, both in copper and zinc, for example. So it's not the large Japanese corporates very much involved as metal traders and producers through smelting. So there is that sort of that culture of metals business in Japan as well.
Yeah, John, I agree with that. I think that you're correct. Just looking at Japan and their natural resource developments, both in country domestically and also out of country as well. There's a number of groups, whether they're spread into Canada, into Africa. JOGMEC is active in a number of ventures. There's a lot of groups that are involved, as you suggested there. So I think Japan realizes their status as an island nation and being able to take care of their natural resource needs both at home and abroad. And I think we've seen that with energy too. I think Japan definitely understands their energy situation as well, hence their motivation to work towards, restarting of nuclear reactors since Fukushima as a perfect example of Japan really, while bureaucratic perhaps, really understands their position and needs to advance accordingly. So I think that is a good set of examples. Well, let's move on here. Let's talk about the recently announced drill program at Pangini, Zambia. John, what are the objectives with this program? You know that project really well.
Yeah, so where we are here, interesting development here which was actually unrelated to us getting involved in the gold exploration in Japan, was that, as you just mentioned, we brought JOGMEC in as a joint venture partner and co-funder of this project. So we're really proud to bring a group of the international reputation of JOGMEC in to share some of the risk on this relatively early stage exploration in Zambia. What this is all about really is it's following up on some early interesting and exciting drill results that we've got. As I mentioned earlier, geophysical targets, punching first, cheap, shallow air core holes through that sand cover. That gives us bedrock geochemistry and geology, a bit like till sampling in a way. In two areas specifically, we've got some very interesting drill intersections already, the so-called Southwest prospect and the D2 target prospect. We're getting some meaningful width intersections there, over 5 meters in thickness, running at about 0.5% copper. And in certain areas, there's an association of cobalt with that mineralization. And down at the Southwest prospect, we're seeing some narrower intersections, but with much higher tenor mineralization. That mineralization is typically chalcopyrite, a very common copper mineral, easy to deal with through standard processing and flotation techniques. And it's got an alteration mineral associated with it called kyanite. And that's a relationship that we see at First Quantum's Sentinel mine, about 130 kilometers to the northeast of us. So really exciting exploration here, exploring under that sand cover. And it's all about, the low-hanging fruit in a lot of these world-class terrains is probably gone. Now it's a question of being a little cleverer and looking for those concealed deposits under the sand cover. Haven't been noticed before because of their concealed nature, but Zambia has produced many tier 1 type copper deposits and mines, in its long history of copper mining.
John, do you think that there's something there? Talk maybe to what you guys would expect. We've got something here or there's nothing here. And what's that cutoff going to be for management? Is there a comparable? Is there something that you can compare as far as what has been delineated so far, a potential profile, what you guys would see as big enough tonnage to make this work?
So where we are, the sort of intersections that we've delivered at the D2 target already, in that sort of 0.47 to 0.53 sort of range so far. That's the sort of grade, that's the overall grade of First Quantum's Sentinel mine and Barrick's Lumwana mine, running at about 0.5. Obviously, those are what we would call relatively, low grade, big tonnage operations. So what we'd be looking to do is increase on those widths, step out along strike. That's what we're busy with at the moment, to see if we can extend the footprint of that mineralization under the shallow sand cover, which in the area of the D2 prospect is around about 20 meters in thickness. That would be one type of target, if you will. And then obviously there's the more high grade vein sort of style of mineralization that would be typical of a deposit such as First Quantum's Kansanshi mine, where you're dealing with narrower but higher grade veins of chalcopyrite mineralization that come together with a lower grade envelope of mineralization. Kansanshi, a very profitable operation, and with a gold credit associated with it as well. So those are the sort of pedigree of discovery that you can find in Zambia. And I think, again, a bit like Japan, if you look at your competitors, that gives you an indication of the terrain that you're working in. And in the case of Zambia, we've got Anglo American, First Quantum, Rio Tinto, really big players who have all identified that the geology and the prospectivity of the Zambian copper belt warrants their involvement. So that gives you an indication of the size of the prize. And I've been working on this project since my time with Antofagasta, and it's really encouraging what we're getting there. So that's why we keep going with this exploration.
John, how about your thoughts just on the Zambia government here? There's been some challenges with some of the majors in the country. What's your relationship there? You've been there for a while. How comfortable are you guys, working through the government process and making sure that you're on their right side?
Yeah, so I've been involved probably more than 15 years now with mineral exploration and development project in Zambia. We've obviously seen a number of governments over that time. As you're probably aware, elections coming up there in the next while. We've always had a good positive I've always had a good positive relationship with the Ministry of Mines specifically, which is obviously our first point of contact there. There's a long history, stepping back for more than 100 years, of copper exploration and mining in Zambia. So there's an understanding of the business. And I can only relay my experience, which has been very similar to what Derek just outlined for Japan. If you go about your business in the correct way, you follow the procedures, you're respectful in Zambia, you've always got a respectful nature to the local communities and your local staff. I've never come across any problems in terms of dealing with the Zambian authorities. Everyone, I think, is pretty aligned. They see the value in new discoveries, and obviously the stimulus to the economy that brings, especially in an area where we are in the northwestern part of Zambia, where there aren't any, where Sentinel is the furthest west discovery in the Zambian copper belt at this point in time.
Very well, John. Looking forward to seeing the results coming out of this program here. And thanks. I appreciate how you guys are able to work with the government here. And Derek, anything further on the pipeline here? You guys have delivered on the Japan assets here. Anything further you guys are looking at a pipeline at this point, or is the focus going to be fixed on what you have now?
Immediately, we're still focused on the current portfolio since we already actually have quite a bit to work with. I will add that we have been still looking at other gold projects, more advanced stage ones to kind of complement our earlier stage assets. So we are looking at things. I would say we're not in a huge rush to immediately buy another project, but I mean, that it could fall in our lap at any time, especially now that we have a closer relationship with B2, and they've kind of opened up a new pipeline of potential projects to us. Because if they're exploring somewhere and they find that it may not reach their immediate thresholds, then that could kind of get shopped down to us. So if it's maybe lower than 2 million ounce deposit, it could go to us. As well, they are seeing other base metal assets come their way, and when those are not appropriate for them, which normally wouldn't be since they're mostly gold focused, that can also get sent over to us. And so John has his work cut out for him since he does have to filter through a lot of different projects. But I wouldn't say we're rushing to buy anything right now. I mean, everybody's kind of settling to see where the gold price heads in the longer term. But I'd say on the copper side and zinc side, I don't think there's any concerns that it's going to drop too much from where it is now.
Well, let's move on to South Mountain here. The PEA is slated for September, a few months out. John, can you maybe just talk to a few ballpark expectations of what that study will show? And maybe, given that I believe this is going from PEA to feasibility direct, do you have any rough ballpark on what investors could expect roughly for a CapEx as well?
I think the important thing on South Mountain is that, we delivered on our sort of target and promise, if you will, of doubling the mineral resource from when we started on this project in 2019, that we announced now a couple of months ago. So that gave us, a more than double on the inferred resource tonnage increase, and over 20% increase on the measured and indicated through that, well-defined underground drilling. And the important thing of that really is it's proved to us all that we can extend these high-grade bodies down at depth, both down dip and down plunge of the mineralization. And it really looks geologically that we're potentially right on the top of a big system here. Nonetheless, as you said, we're focusing on the current mineral resource, which is in the 1 million ton range at this point in time, but high grade mineralization, both in terms of zinc and silver specifically. And that we building the PEA study, and that will guide us as to what a feasibility study will look like. I think it's going to be important to bear in mind whatever the exact numbers that come out of that PEA study in terms of the NPV and IRR of the project. We will know that we can expand that resource incrementally over time. So, we're looking at getting that startup mining operation going. Probably capital cost could be in the $40 to $50 million range. That might well see us being re-rated in terms of we will become a metal producer. And actually about 40 to 50% of the value of this mineralization is already tied up in the precious metals, both in the terms of the gold and silver content. So I think it's a project that can only improve on us over time as we do more drilling. But it's a question of drawing a line in the sand, if you will, designing that startup mining operation, get ourselves into production, producing a concentrate, and that will truly put us in the production environment. So then we will be doing high quality exploration. We will still have other development opportunities on the South Mountain project itself and hopefully elsewhere. And we will be producing metal in concentrate.
John, talk just briefly about the time frame here. Give us a look, 2 to 3 years out on this project. Could we see production and so forth happen? And then obviously we know that the project's probably going to be expanded between PEA and feasibility study. But then also one other thing with the time frame, can you just add what's your expectation on recoveries of these metals?
Sure. So where we are at the moment, PEA in September this year. We'll probably then go through a phase of detailed planning of a feasibility study based on the results of that and guidance from that PEA study. We know we've got some pretty solid historical metallurgical test work results already. And right now we're working with SGS Lakefield on refining and reproducing that test work right now to go into the PEA study. We don't anticipate any problems there. In fact, we probably see upside in that metallurgical work. It will be a fairly focused feasibility study because of the nature of this mineralization and our sort of startup tonnage that we require at these grades. So we're dealing with very high, in situ rock values here. So that's the advantage of this project. That will get us into a construction decision. And of course, we're sitting on a property here on private land, effectively permitted to a construction decision. This will be an interesting project in the next 18 months, 2 years time. We could well be moving forward with this project and getting ourselves into construction here.
Do you guys see cash flows by late 2023? Is that a fair estimation?
Difficult to predict, really. I mean, because of the startup scale of the mineralization, the build time on the mine wouldn't be that long given further favorable technical results. So not impossible, but really difficult to determine exactly when we would be in a cash flowing situation. But as mining projects go, certainly on the shorter end of a lead time to cash flow.
Yeah, I think the cash flow is an important component here because then that, of course, sets you up to fund pipeline. And so looking forward to seeing the efforts on this. I think this one's very important to the company. Let's talk ESG efforts for a moment, if you will. What work is being done on this front to prove up company efforts on ESG and then also to prove up to those groups who have placed ESG mandates as a primary criteria for their investment decisions?
Well, we kind of use B2Gold as kind of the template, I guess, or the bar for us when we look at how we operate in various countries. John has a lot of experience working in Zambia, obviously, and has good relationships with the service providers, the communities there. And he's spent a number of years operating in Zambia, as has our joint venture partner down there. And we also have JOGMEC involved with us, so they're going to always expect a pretty high standard for us when operating with communities and making sure that we're abiding by the environmental rules and regulations. So we're very cognizant of that. I don't think, in South Mountain, it's very similar. Fortunately for us, because South Mountain is quite high grade and has a relatively small footprint since it's underground, it really makes things a lot easier for us to maintain kind of all the environmental and health and safety type of standards there. Recently we had to obviously change some of our procedures, but we haven't had any incidents. We haven't had any lost time or any significant lost time at any of our projects. So we've really been, I think, operating very well So yeah, I would say that that really, if you follow in the footsteps of what B2 is doing, you can't really go too wrong. I mean, they're already operating in some pretty challenging jurisdictions, and I'd say have done them very, very well. So yeah, I think that that bodes well for us too.
And I understand that, obviously ESG efforts, given the company size, are going to be proportionate to what you guys can do, of course, and that'll ramp up over time. Let's finish up here, guys. John, maybe just look out here for us. Give me just a critical path outlook for the company here. It appears that all three of these projects are basically going to be advanced in parallel. Can you just kind of give us a quick sequence here?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier, the South Mountain project is obviously the more advanced asset. Once we've got that PEA under our belts, that has a relatively short timeline to development and potentially production, giving further positive technical results, but all points towards that at this point in time. Also, the nature of the exploration in Japan, although we need some significant drilling success over time there, but we're working from already, certainly in a number of cases, what we would call advanced exploration properties, where we already have, significant mineralization, high-grade gold intersections at relatively shallow depths. So that is something that could be fast-tracked towards a deposit, specifically at Cato, in a relatively short timeline as well. And then running in parallel with that, the sort of more tier one focused exploration that we're running out in Zambia, partnered and sharing some risk on that with JOGMEC now is sort of an ideal sort of mix of projects at this point in time. And exposes investors to both that sort of sequential mine building sort of steps that'll come from South Mountain and potentially Japan in good time, and then also potentially that big win through a discovery in a world-class terrain like the Zambian Copper Belt.
Gentlemen, wrapping up here for potential investors who are on the sidelines listening in the audience, market cap of the company stands at about 64 million Canadian dollars here. What would you say to them at this stage and at current price levels? Why should they consider BeMetals now?
There's no question at the current price levels, this is a really good buying opportunity. There's been a bit of retrace in general commodities, as you're well aware at this point. There's good near-term catalysts for growth coming out of all three projects really, and adding value. And it's really the depth of experience and the knowledge of the team in progressing both exploration, development, and running operations in very challenging jurisdictions across the world. You've got a good way of being exposed to the upside of these projects and potentially new additions in good time. But knowing that the company is being sort of guided, built, and run by some of the top discoverers and operators in the mineral business over many decades.
A fair proposal. Derek, what do you think?
Yeah, in particular, this week has been kind of a really good opportunity because, like I said earlier, we had an aggressive seller that was stepping into the market. And because we have traditionally had relatively low trading volumes, it made it a little bit tougher. But I can see that the volumes are increasing and we are seeing the buying coming in. I would just add that because we are starting to speak more with some of the key B2 gold investors, once those generalist type of funds or larger funds start to step in, I think these prices are going to look pretty cheap. And that's why Clive and myself and others have been buying in the open market. So it's a good time. It's actually an excellent time to be getting in right now.
And Derek, best way for investors to reach out to the company?
Just reach out to me. The easiest email address is info@bemetalscorp.com, or else you can just go to our website, which is just bemetalscorp.com.
John, Derek, it's good to chat. Looking forward to continued progress to build this company. You guys keep up the efforts and let's stay in touch.
Andrew, thanks for your support.
Thanks very much, Andrew.